Hi.
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 Hello.
I'm curious about
Building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
Welcome to the Curious Fox podcast for those challenging the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
And I'm Jacqueline Misla, and we are back from hiatus.
Woo! We certainly are. And how are you? Do you feel rested?
No. No, I do not. No, the answer is no. We took a step back from the podcast and the recording hustle to do some annual planning and to rest. And I don't think that either of us rested as much as we should have.
Totally.
I know that for me, over the last few weeks, I've been managing a home renovation and moving and dealing with family health issues and leading large work projects and navigating through the aftermath of Ira, and there was flooding in my home. And then, of course, just everything that's happening in the world, global displacement and shortages and low national employment and lack of childcare and safe schooling in many areas, and just this awareness of global issues the moment that they're happening, which is amazing, but also unprecedented. Yes. And so like moment by moment, there is news on the political environmental crises in Texas, in New Orleans, in Haiti, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Africa, in Beirut, in Lebanon, and on and on and on. And the world feels like it is on fire and it is weighing on my heart. And you, Effy Blue, you were dealing with literal fire.
Literal fire, exactly. I totally feel you in everything you've said. And yeah, absolutely. I've been dealing with wildfires firsthand for the first time in my life. As some of you know, I've been building a co-working, co-living space down by the Mediterranean and trying out a quasi-rural lifestyle with the hopes of taking a break from what feels like a world that's tearing itself apart while imploding, while burning and drowning all at the same time.
Yeah.
And yeah, the wildfires consumed the peninsula that we are on last month. Our project almost burnt down one of the main structures, an earth-bagged dome that we've been building by hand with sweat, blood, and tears. Almost burnt down. It was so close. The fire was put out like 5 feet, almost as tall as I am, which is not very, very tall. 5 feet from the main structure, and afterwards we could put our backs to the dome and look at our feet, and you see the charred ground coming right up to the dome, and you just realize how close it was. And we look around us, and we are an island in a charred black trees all around us. And what saved us was actually some what felt like frivolous decisions that we made at the time. We're just luck, really. We just made some decisions on where to put things and what to flatten, and it looks like we just made some right decisions by luck and we're saved. But definitely we look around us and we just see charred black trees all around us now, and it's heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
We went around the peninsula, we drove around, and we saw all the aftermath of the other wildfires, and that was just so, this area is so green and so lush and so fertile, and the roads that we took for comfort and taking a break from everything is now just like black and dark. So that's really hard to take. And also because I've essentially been growing things and essentially farming for the last year, I feel like I've been seeing the impact of climate change firsthand. Also, we've had crop failures this year. Things that grow in abundance like tomatoes and cucumbers and courgettes around here have all failed. And not only our land, not that we're just being rookie, and we are being rookie, but just our neighboring farms also. People who really know what they're doing, people who have been advising us on how to set up a permaculture situation on our land. You know, people who really know about farming. They've had crop failures, so it's not. It feels like it's a lot to do with the climate rather than just like, not being good at farming. We've had earthquakes and floods, and the pandemic is still going on. And anyway, this list goes on. Also, I'm pretty close to Afghanistan and Syria and Beirut and Lebanon, and not only geographically, but culturally. So it's also scary to see the events unfold over there. It feels like things can go the same way in a heartbeat where I am, which, I can always move, it's available to me, but not available to the people around me. So that also weighs on my mind and honestly keeps me up at night.
Yeah, we have a really amazing lineup of episodes and interviews that we've planned for the fall and winter. But today it felt important to just pause and name the national and global state of affairs and the impact that it has in our own lives. And so that is our topic for today. Love, sex, and relationships during an apocalypse.
During the apocalypse. Which what it feels like.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I think it feels clear to everybody that the stress of the world is having a very real impact on our day-to-day lives, including our relationships with ourselves and other people.
Absolutely. In my work, I'm seeing the impact of this stuff on my clients' relationships and sex lives. It feels like initially when you're having these conversations, when we're in sessions, it feels like it's about the relationship and it's about, the people, and you dig a little deep, and it used to be about the relationships and people. But now I'm seeing that it's anxiety that gets displaced from other places, and people aren't aware, people aren't so conscious of it. So it's just easier to blame your metamor. It's just easier to blame your partner who's, late from a date. I just feel like some of the stuff that would otherwise be not such a big deal just feels like a bigger deal these days. Like people are so away from their sense of safety and security. They're just so much easier to activate. People are just so much easier to activate or to get triggered.
Yeah, no, I think that is true. It's never about the dishes, right? It's always, it's something deeper that's happening. You and I, we did an exercise so for the behind the scenes, we have been meeting throughout the hiatus and planning and working, and this continues to be a theme for us, right? We probably spend the first hour of our time together just like lamenting and sharing stories around all the things that are happening. And so one of our exercises was, let us document all of the things under love, sex, and relationships that we feel like is being impacted right now. Like what is happening? And so for love, I think one of the things that we started to talk through was that self-love right now feels really hard to come by. Like let's not even start. We're going to get there talking about loving other people, but loving yourself right now, despite all the memes that are reminding us to like take naps and drink tea, we are being very hard on ourselves. I am being very hard on myself, and we're tired, but the expectations around us have not lifted. So the expectations of partnering and parenting and working and adulting and like all of those things are exactly the same, except we have half of the energy, half of the capacity, half of the emotional intelligence. And so when we can't meet what felt like used to be normal, we become really hard on ourselves. And so I think self-love has been feeling really hard.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when people struggle with self-love, they look outside to make up that gap, that deficit. And they reach out to loved ones and lovers and partners. And it can feel like that we talk about the crack in the swimming pool, that it just feels like there's a big crack in the swimming pool, and it doesn't matter how many people you reach out to and what you hear from them, it just feels like we can't get enough love right now.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. And I think the impact of that, before the summer, there was a lot of conversation around shot girl summer and hot vax summer. And like everyone was going to the doors were going to be released and everyone was going to run out and just have orgies on the street. And actually what's been happening is people are getting home with each other on to hook up. And then they realize they just want to cry and hug each other.
Cuddle,
people just want, right. They just are can you hold my hand? Can I tell you about what's been going on with me? Can we just hug each other? And that I think is part of that is there's just longing for emotional connection, for a feeling of love. And some of that, to your point, is to make up for some of the love that we're not giving ourselves right now.
For sure. Yeah. And I think sometimes love is about safety, and because we've not been feeling safe, I think we're also kind of swimming in that middle ground of, I think I want love. Actually, what I'm trying to do is feel safe through kind of that attachment love, that parental love almost, and it gets kind of confusing in our heads, and I think that part of our brains are foggy for everyone right now, because there's, the global pandemic meant that most of us globally unified in being afraid. We're unified by fear, and what that does to our nervous system is it makes us foggy. It makes us foggy around our emotions, our intellectual approach to things. And I think some of us are looking for love, for intimacy and closeness, and some of us kind of looking at love in an effort to feel safe and grounded.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. And I think that leads us to our long list of sexual impact that this has had. And, you go back home, you think you're going to hook up, and actually you just want to cuddle. And I remember, and as we were talking about it, one of the things that you said is we're in survival mode, and in a survival state, it is hard to be turned on, right? That evolution does not want us to have babies in crisis.
Exactly. Our smart evolution, our instincts is no babies, there's a crisis.
No babies in the midst of an apocalypse.
Exactly.
Shut it down. Shut it all down.
Yeah, it's hard to feel sexy and afraid at the same time. I mean, I think, there's definitely you can wander around in the kink realm and play with being afraid and sexy, and there's all these fantasies that you can enact that really mix this idea of fear and tension and sexuality. But I think when it's real and you're really fearing for your life, I think it's not sexy for most people. It's not where the erotic lives, I think.
Yeah. I recently read Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, and she introduces this idea of accelerators and brakes. And so this idea of there are things that will turn you on, that will accelerate arousal, and then there are things that are brakes that are no, we're not doing this right now. And she gives us this quiz that can help you see generally in your general state, where do you fall on that? So for example, I have high accelerators and low brakes, which means that I can get turned on often and not much will impact that, right? I can stay in that state. And so I did the quiz, and then I had my partner do the quiz, and we realized she has a lot of breaks. So if there are distractions, if there are worries, if there are frustrations, that will limit her ability to be aroused. And I do think that is what is happening for many folks, is that you may have the same level of accelerators. You may look at your partner and be like, my God, they're so sexy, and I want, or you may feel physical arousal, but then it's wait, there's a pandemic, and I'm wait, homeschooling, and wait, and it's just too much. And then all these breaks happen and everything stops.
Exactly. And I think also to have sex, you need space, privacy. It's hard to have, it's hard for people to have sex if they've got kids running around. It's been hard to see multiple partners. It's been hard to travel in between homes. People are limiting themselves to, quarantines, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in a minute. And I think it's also just practicalities, just pandemic has made things hard, which I think is also becomes a break, meaning it's just practically difficult to have sex. So it's just true. Okay, well, I just won't bother, it's just it's easier not to now,
Yes, the erotic does not live in frustration or in comfort or in the known. And actually, what's too bad is this is a time when we all need to be having lots of orgasms. Like we need the release of energy in some positive ways, but it is also the time when there's just like just a constant of low sex drives everywhere. I think that's true if you're in a relationship, and if you are single, if you are dating, if you're dating multiple people, if you're solo poly, there's like a sex drought in that way. And first of all, it's hard to meet people. And then when you do, it is now hard to kind of stay in the sustained sexy place for a long time.
Yeah, I know the non-monogamous communities around the world, and I've had the opportunity to go on a podcast in Australia called The Relationship Show by a couple who do conscious couples coaching, and they are practicing non-monogamy. They're actually listeners of the show. So hello to them. Hello, guys. and many communities around the world that are inherently social, right? Mostly non-monogamous communities, poly communities tend to be, social by design. That's one of the reasons why people chose those relationship styles, those relationship designs, because they want to connect with a lot of people. They want to explore relationship with a lot of people. And that has been so difficult. It's been really hard to connect with people. It's been really hard to be in community. It's been really hard to date and explore different relationships.
Yeah, I think that was on our relationship list. That fact that right now, so we've moved away from tribal communities, and we've moved away in many societies from religion and religious institutions. And those were places where we found community and connection and meaning. And now instead, we're looking for an entire community of needs to be met by one person, right? Or by however many people we're dating in relationship with. We want them to inspire us, to make us turned on, to make us thoughtful, to make us feel alive. And then we're looking to our jobs for community and for meaning, for impact, for purpose, except everyone's been quitting their jobs or hates their job. And so that's even now more pressure on the relationship, because now I need you to be my church. I need you to be my tribe. I need you to be my partner. I need you to be my co-parent. I need you to be my co-CEO. That's a lot to put on a relationship, particularly in the midst of the apocalypse. That's a lot. And I think that, as a result of that, a lot of us are handling day-to-day conflicts and arguments from that triggered state, that state of wanting and needing and not getting and fear. And so something about the dishes blows up into something that it bigger than it needs to be because of all of this pressure.
And I think what makes all of this insidious is that, and the reason why we wanted to do this podcast is not all of us are aware how this macro state is impacting us in micro ways. And we're kind of going to talk through that now. But I think that's the thing. We know all this stuff is happening in the world. It's very hard not to know because, like you said, it is all over everything. It's all over our social media. It's all over the news. It's all over the radio. It's all over the internet. It's very hard to get away from. It's not used to be where you turned on the TV and you know there's going to be news, so you were kind of you're prepared for the content. Now it's just anytime, anywhere, it comes and hits you. So we are aware of all the things, but we're not entirely aware of how that stuff is impacting our relationships and the way that we connect and the way that we perceive the world. And I think that piece, not everyone's aware, and we are looking for the issues within the relationship, and it's not always the relationship.
Right. We talked a little bit about that in the episode Roots and Wings, where we were talking about that internal feeling of feeling antsy and wanting more and trying to break free in something. And you project that onto your relationship. And I think that's part of what we're talking about that happens here. It's just there's this feeling inside that just feels frustrating and sad and all of it. And then it just pours out of us.
Also powerlessness.
Yes.
Knowing all this stuff is happening and feeling incredibly powerless. And then that can manifest itself as controlling behavior in the things that you think you can control. And that is yourself and your immediate environment. And we also are often under the impression that we can control our relationships, our people around us. And it can easily escalate into unconsensual dominance and controlling behavior and all that kind of stuff. And we don't even realize where it's coming from.
Yeah. I was just saying, I don't know what it is that we can do about it. Well, we're going to talk about some things to do, but my vote initially was like, let's just sleep until it's over. But that's if people can actually sleep. Those of us who are struggling with sleep, that doesn't even feel like an option.
Yes.
And so there are some things. I mean, there's, certainly there are all the self-care advice, right? There's the basics. We do need sleep and water and food and meditation and movement. You can, have as many manicures as you want or light as many candles as you would like. But I think the analogy that you use, it's like trying to fill a strainer with water instead of using a pot. That if you're not rested, if you haven't eaten, if you haven't drinking water, that manicure is really not going to help.
Exactly.
And so I do think that's a big piece of it is we have to do that. And even fitting in and feeling out where we can do meditation and, make good choices where we can. I have been doing makeup meditation. I think I've talked about that on the show before, where it is hard for me just to sit still and in the morning and to carve out time. And so the time in the morning when I am quiet and alone is when I'm putting on my makeup. And so I put on like meditation, either guided meditation or kind of music that inspires that. And that is my quiet time. Like that is, it's almost like movement meditation. And so trying to do something like that, I think is important. You talked about this in terms of limiting our exposure to the news, like trying to figure out the balance between being informed, but not saturated.
Saturated.
Right? Like finding phone-free moments.
Yeah. I mean, our phones are lifelines. Sure. We love our phones. The thing that I tell my clients is really no phones in the bedroom. I maintain that suggestion, that invitation, no phones in the bedroom.
That's radical. I don't know if I can.
I know it's so. People are just like, whoa, what? Like you're trying to open up your relationship, and you think no phones in the bedroom is radical. So try it. So I mean, honestly, no phones in the bedroom, and no phones first thing in the morning. Honestly, don't do it. People.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That is literally the first thing as I check all this, and I know that is the vice of it. I know it. I've heard it. I've read it. I've seen it. But there is something for me personally that is just calming about knowing, okay, these are the things I have to do. These are the emails that are there. I don't know. It checks off some list in my mind. And I think some of what has been the antidote of that for me is changing the noise. So being mindful of what it is that I am listening to. And so inserting some things that I'm reading or listening to that is positive, that is restful and peaceful, that is sexy, that is what it is that I am trying to feel, being mindful to curate those types of spaces and those opportunities to hear and digest those things, I think has been really important.
No, I agree with you. I've been lucky. I've been able, because it's just a lifestyle that I'm trying out right now. My first priority in the morning is the plants. So I have to go out and water a bunch of plants in the ground. So that's been nice. There's no point in looking at my phone because I know at least for the first hour I'm going to be watering things and looking at the crops and taking care of the chickens and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a game changer. I'm not going to lie.
Well, that to me, I think that's the last kind of self-care personal tip that I would give that has been helpful. And it sounds like finding those little moments of delight, those little moments of being fully present. So that could be long shower, or that could be your morning run, or for me, makeup meditation, or even just the little delights of the food that you prepare or the presentation of your food. I've been trying to, particularly for dinners, make it look good and nice and that feels better, and a comfortable bed and your feet in the soil and nature and sunlight and naps and being surrounded by animals, For us, maybe it's cats and dogs. For you, it sounds like goats and chickens. Yeah. And so, doing a little bit of that, carving out intentional time for curiosity and whimsy and play and adventure. It does take some intentionality, even though everything feels exhausting now. I think the default setting can be fatigue or fear or frustration. And so trying to intentionally create some magic. There's a lot that we cannot control out there. And so figuring out what is it that we can control, what can we let go of, and what in our world can we control? Not people. We can't control other people, but we can control, the presentation of our food. We can control what we do for the first 10 minutes that we're awake. We can control, look for those kinds of things. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And good relationships start with the self. So all that stuff is such a good investment for your relationships. Definitely for yourself, goes without saying, but also for your relationships. So it starts with the self for sure. Interestingly, I'm finding there are a bunch of learnings from polyamory that helps us with relationships of any design during these hard times, actually. That even with my clients who are monogamous or people who are designing their relationships and they may have set off to be in an open relationship, but having started the relationship by design process have decided, oh, they don't need to be open, they just need to design their relationships differently. There are still a bunch of learnings from polyamory that is working for them. And I think in general, some of these sort of poly way of being in relationships can really help during these times when we're all feeling a little overwhelmed. We've already seen an evolution of the polycule, which is essentially a micro community that we call the quarantine. During the quarantine, we've set up these like quarantines, so a close group of people who are aligned in values and lifestyle choices, in collaboration with each other, in meeting each other's social needs and communal needs and all that kind of stuff, which inevitably leads to intimacy, not necessarily sexual intimacy, but social intimacy and emotional intimacy, and for some, spiritual intimacy. And I think that is probably helpful now, creating a close group of friends that you really expand your need for intimacy to them. I think that's really helpful right now, because like you said, one person, one relationship cannot be all the things, especially when our needs are just much bigger,
Yeah.
like our need for safety and security.
I think you're right. I think that, and even if it isn't, I think that for some folks that can happen within friendship. I think that can happen between queer platonic relationships, where it's like that hybrid between friendship and relationships. I think it can happen in relationship. I think it's just about naming it. Even if you're out there in the world and you're dating, naming, like, I am looking for someone to just delight with, to go roller skating and to have a picnic and to do like lovely I'm looking for that. Or I'm looking for someone to have serious conversations with and to just be heard and to hear. And I'm looking for, like, I think that if we can do a self-assessment around what it is that is being filled right now. We've talked about that before with the fuel gauge activity, that if you think about the different areas in your life like a fuel gauge, and you say, well, what is full right now? And where are the spaces that are empty? What I hear you saying is, okay, now intentionally seek that out, and from other people, not just your partners.
Yes, invest in, definitely find new people. It's a little hard right now. It's getting much easier actually, but invest in existing relationships too. Like, let them escalate, let them get closer, let them develop and evolve into these like meaningful, authentic, close, intimate relationships.
And in this virtual environment, people have been creating really robust virtual relationships. And so there are many colleagues who I've never met before because my relationship with them just is on Zoom, as is, with my clients and, folks who are meeting online in different spaces. So it is challenging because we're not meeting people in person, but there's actually something that's really interesting about being able to meet anyone from anywhere in the entire world now and start to build and form some relationships that way. I've been talking to some folks who have been doing like pen paling and like writing actual letters to people, because there is something about expressing yourself with paper and pen that allows you to be more vulnerable. And so they've been sharing out more intimate stories with a pen pal back and forth. And so, I've been thinking about that for myself. Like, what are ways in which I can create, again, whimsy, magic, connection, delight, peacefulness, both with myself and for myself, but by building some other relationships, some other friendships.
Cute. I'm going to start sending you letters now, Jacqueline. I might start with postcards though.
Yes, we have to use quill pens though, or feathered, but we need to go have some ink, dip it in. Let's do it right.
Yes.
Even, let me say, I think what we're talking about is changing your mindset and your energy so that you can be open to connection. I think for me, what that's looked like within my relationships is I can feel when I am frustrated, and I can feel when I'm short-tempered, and I can feel, and I have to I could respond with that energy, even though that has nothing necessarily to do with the other person, but taking the deep breath and saying, okay, how do I want to communicate? How do I want to be seen? And then just carving out little moments. I keep talking about delight, but that's been something that's been on my mind for a while. And so for me, for example, with my wife, we take walks. With my partner, we made brunch. We made fancy brunch together. And we, every once in a while, just spontaneously will just start slow dancing in the kitchen or the living room. Or at night, we'll read together. I have a discipline of reading with my daughter every night. There are just these moments that are both spontaneous, but also on purpose, that remind me to be grounded and see the joy amongst the chaos and the fire that's happening around me.
I love that. And the intention that goes behind that is important, because you're choosing, right? You're making choices to do things that feel good for you, that nourish you and people around you. So that's amazing. The other piece that I think that polyamorous folk really, internalize and know and practice is this idea of healthy, intentional space is a good thing, right? So leaving space for the other person and not being personal, that not being about, oh, this person doesn't want to be with me, but really realizing that space is what you need to grow. The space is what you need to really see each other and all these wonderful things. And I think polyfolk practice leaving space, because then they, that's how they manage multiple relationships. And I think even though you're in a monogamous relationship, realizing taking some space, creating healthy space in your monogamous relationship is a good thing. It allows for at least some sense of variety, some sense of newness. If you don't create that space, if you don't allow for that space, then it just becomes this blurry mushness that can be really hard to get out of.
Yeah, absolutely true. And let me say, I think that's actually very hard right now, because if we're feeling needy or we're feeling afraid, someone saying, I need some space can feel really triggering. And I think that is, if you can do it in a way that is kind. So for example, I'll text my partner or vice versa, and I'll say, I am not in a good energy space right now, and I don't want to project that onto you. And so I will text you back when I'm in a different space. For now, I just need some space. It's not about you. I just don't want to actually make it about you. So we need some space from each other. And for me, naturally, because I go back and forth between two homes, there is that natural missing that happens, which is a nice surprise. I don't think that I thought about that in the construct of my relationship. But each time I come home to somebody, I'm like, oh, I missed you. There was space there. My daughter comes home from her dad's house. I'm like, I miss you. And so missing, even though there's a lot of negativity around that, missing is a good thing sometimes.
Absolutely. It's good. It's anticipation. It's also good energy that makes us feel alive. The other piece, again, that is prevalent in the poly way of being, if you will, is not, and we talked about this a minute ago, but not to expect your one partner to meet all your needs and vice versa, right? And it's about investing in a broad set of relationships and have room for intimacy and meaningful connection, even physical ones that aren't necessarily sexual, right? Cuddling is a thing, allowing for that space, allowing for that closeness. Again, it doesn't have to be sexual. You can still be monogamous. But realize that one person is just not going to meet all your needs, and you're not going to meet the other person's needs. And really think about, just like your finances, diversify your relationships. I think the other piece that that we need to address is just what we said around low sex drives. People just aren't in the mood to have sex. They have a lot of brakes on. And it's hard to create that sexual space because kids are at home, or you're tired, or you've been in those, four walls for too long. I think it's just important to do that by intention. It's kind of saying, I'm going to create space for sexual energy. I'm not going to expect anything. I'm not going to expect for it to go into a full-blown session, but I'm going to create space for sexual energy and just see where it takes you. Just see where it takes you, how it feels, and sit in it. And I think that's just putting some effort into going to that place, right? So going to that erotic place, that finding that sexual energy and seeing where it goes. Also think through what sex means to you, right? Too often we think sex is hard penis and a wet vagina. And that's kind of, we define it and we talk about how we're not having sex. Really think about sexual energy and think about arousal and make it broad and add sensuality into it and not make it about actions, but the place that you go and the energy that you put out and receive, so that you don't have to constantly worry about, are we having sex? Are we having sex? Are we having sex? Which essentially means, are we having penetration? So I would say really think about sexuality in as broad of a sense as you can, and think about it through arousal and the erotic.
And I think, to me, that leads into even just naming that, even naming when you want to engage with someone physically, you want to engage with your partner in a sexual way, and they're like, oh, that feels exhausting. To say like, okay, can we try this? Can we play in this way? You know, Angie Gunn has shared the advice of ask for all that you need all the time and expect nothing, right? So ask, but then have a plan B. Like have your like, you know, alone time area set up already. Have your like, you know, whatever you're going to watch, to like ask for the thing that you need in terms of connection, I think is important. And I think within that, it's also giving permission to say, it doesn't have to look like this. It doesn't have to look like, you know, because I do think that people think that sex can be really labor intensive. Like, oh, it's a lot. We were talking about the other day, right? So you, myself, and my partner Alexis, when we were just like in a planning meeting, we're talking about how sometimes masturbation is just faster and easier than sex. And she was like, this, you know, making the hand gesture for herself is a lot less work than like all of this, making like hand gestures for like oral sex and all that. She's like, that's a lot. And so it was funny to hear from me, because I was like, all right, we don't have to make it all that. Like, we don't have to make it that labor intensive if that's what you're thinking this is. But I do think it's about kind of you know, being creative, like you said, figuring out what else can feel like closeness, what else can feel like intimacy, what else can, you know, turn you on, and not having the expectation that then that means a gigantic climax at the end of it that your partner get like, you know, let's all just cut each other some slack in terms of what is possible right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good point to kind of make. Like, at some point, you just need to cut some slack for yourself, your partners. These are hard times, and you can put all the effort in, you can do all the things, and at some point, you're gonna have to cut some slack and just let things be.
Yeah, shit is hard. We're doing the best we can. So and there are going to be times when the thing that we want, we don't get, right? That's the other piece. Let's acknowledge and sit in discomfort and disappointment, knowing that every situation will not be resolved in some tidy solution. Yes. That I think that we glorify feeling joyful, feeling happy, feeling delighted, feeling comfortable, feeling comforted, feeling all of that, which is great. But also human emotions are sadness and fear and longing, and we need to give room for those things too. So sometimes we just got to sit in it. And I got to say, not only is that certainly hard for me to do, it's hard for me to watch my partners sit in it, my daughter sit in it. I want to be like, no, let's fix it. Let's make pancakes. Everything is better with pancakes. Like, come on, let's get out of that funk. And I'm learning now over time, like sometimes you just got to let it be. Just sit in the sadness, sit in the disappointment, let it live. It needs to exist and breathe. It is another human feeling that we need to have. Yeah. And so be mindful of that. I think that's I'm just naming that out loud, and also for myself.
At some point, yes, pancakes aren't going to save the world, but they're fun anyway. It's funny. So I think the important takeaway here is, as Jessica Fern shared with us when we talked about her book, Polysecure, we can ask ourselves, when there's a problem, that is it a me problem or is it a we problem? And I would like to add in there, or is it a world problem? Are we being impacted by our macro experience in micro ways that is directly impacting our relationships. So when you're being frustrated, when you're feeling frustrated, when you're feeling sad about your relationship, about things that aren't working out for you with the people that you're connected to, definitely ask the question, is it a me problem? Is it a we problem? And add in there, or is it a world problem?
Yeah. So while we were on hiatus, we were busy inviting amazing guests for the rest of the year. And we're going to be talking about things like relationship agreements and cultural identity in polyamory and how to find a sex worker and daddy and kink and graphic sex project and sense of safety and the nervous system and attachment and the history of hair removal and holiday specials and Halloween specials and year-end specials. And there's just a lot that's going on that I'm very excited about. And so if you want to hear more of this, right, like and follow the podcast so that you can get these upcoming episodes delivered straight to your phone for free. And if you share this podcast with a friend or a partner, then you can both listen to it and talk about them afterwards. And a friendly word of advice. It is a very good strategy to introduce a new idea like non-monogamy or kink or play parties or even going to couples therapy to someone else by saying, hey, did you listen to that episode? What did you think about that? I'm just saying. It is a nice way for you to have to introduce something without you saying it yourself. So like it, follow it, share it. If you want to get some previews of what is to come, if you want some behind the scenes, if you want access to all of our video recorded workshops, then go to our Patreon page. We Are Curious Foxes, our past events, our workshops, all of that stuff is there. If you want to learn more about our guests that are coming on, if you want to read some blogs and articles, which are going to provide deeper dives into our podcast topics, if you want to connect with other foxes and for fun photos of Effy and I, then you got to go to Instagram. You got to go to Facebook. We Are Curious Foxes. That's where you're going to find all of those things. And if you have a suggestion for a topic that you want us to explore in the new year, or if you have a question or a story that you want to share, then send us an email or a voice memo at listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com. Or you can record a question for the show by calling us at 201-870-0063.
This episode is produced and edited by Nina Pollock, who is our constant in the midst of chaos. Our intro music is composed by Dave Saha. We are so grateful for their work. And we're grateful to you for listening. As always, stay curious, friends. Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.